Hi there, and welcome to the Cool Flowers Virtual Book Study Wrap-Up video. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I'm the author of the book Cool Flowers, How to Grow and Enjoy Long-Blooming Hardy Annuals Using Cool Weather Techniques. And this has been a great 10-week book study. We've had such great interaction from everybody with questions and people posting their comments and experiences, and so I really thank you for all of that. So again, down below, if you don't already have your copy of Cool Flowers, there is a list of vendors where you can pick up your copy, and hope that you'll do that and enjoy my book. And I've got my notebook here of questions that you guys have asked over the last 10 weeks. I've kind of gone through and picked out those that kind of had a common theme, the one I heard over and over again. And so that's what I'm going to kind of share with you today, is kind of hit some of those topics and just add a little bit more and maybe circle around just a little bit. So the first thing that I want to bring right to the top again is people hear the word annual and they instantly think of the most common annuals, the warm season tender annuals, zinnias, tomatoes, petunias, those flowers that we plant out in the garden after our last frost date and the soil has warmed, and those plants grow all summer long and perform beautifully. Those are tender annuals. What Cool Flowers is all about are cool season hardy annuals. It's not only plants that like it cool to cold, they thrive under those conditions and in fact will not perform under the heat of summer. So remember that when you think or when you get afraid to plant hardy annuals at their proper time, just remember the most popular hardy annual there is, and that's the pansy. Those of us in the lower half of the country know that we plant those in the fall. They go through winter and then take off again in spring. Some people even further south can plant them throughout winter anytime. And then those people in the most northern parts of the country plant pansies in really early spring, long before their last frost date has passed. And those are that pattern that pansies follow are the same patterns that Cool Flowers hardy annuals follow. So just keep that in mind. It's a real eye-opener, and so don't be afraid and just think of the pansy. So the other topic that I got a lot of questions about was planting seeds, or the timing of planting. And I just want to highlight, because this was really confusing to a lot of people. I'm going to say to you, there's lots of hardy annuals that can really have their seeds planted out in the garden, more so than any other group of flowers. It's because of the time that they're being planted in the garden. The correct time is more inviting for germinating seeds out in the garden. It's cooler, it rains more often typically, and that rain lasts longer because the ground's not drying out. So planting seeds directly in the garden for those cool flowers that prefer that method or are happy with that method, you can really do it. But here's the rub. You can push the envelope beyond what Cool Flowers tells you the planting time is when you plant transplants. Not all Cool Flowers can be started indoors, but many of them can. Because a transplant can be planted out in the garden a little bit later than a seed can be planted out in the garden. And why is that? Because a seed, even cool season seeds, does need some warmth to actually sprout and germinate and grow into a little plant. So let's just say this happens to be in October that we're shooting this video. We should be planting Cool Flowers, in fact, this week on our farm, but we're not because we've had so much rain. It's still too wet. We'll be doing it in the next week or so. So let's just say that it continues to rain and we can't prepare our gardens to plant for a month. So we're weeks later than the optimal planting time. We can easily take transplants out to the garden and plug them into beds because they are willing to grow roots under cooler conditions. However, those direct seeded flowers, if we have to take those seeds out to the garden much later than your optimal planting time, and the nights have gotten cold, the days really aren't heating up like they were back when you were supposed to plant, you just won't have good germination. In fact, many of those seeds will probably germinate next spring, but that introduces a whole nother can of worms of weed pressure and mulching and other steps. So what I want to say to you is you can push the envelope and plant outside of the optimal planting time, meaning later than you're supposed to, when you start seeds indoors and plant them out. In fact, here I'm in Zone 7, southeastern Virginia. We can really plant throughout the winter because our ground never really freezes. So that's the concept of pushing the envelope beyond your planting time. So if you're just hearing this right now and you haven't tried Cool Flowers, chances are good that you can start seeds now and get them planted out even though it's past your time and still have great luck. So the other thing, I've got several topics here. The other thing is I want to share just how growing in the season is a real gift. And what I mean by that is now that fall is here, you know, our summer stuff just isn't blooming as quickly as it does in the summer because the days are shorter. It's cool in the morning, it's cool overnight. When you grow flowers in their season, cool season flowers in early spring, and then again we touched a little bit on growing hardy annuals in the fall to bloom like we would have planted them a month or two ago, to start blooming now and to bloom right up into the first hard frost that we have. When you grow in the season, plants are just easier. You don't have to cuddle them, coddle them, fuss with them. So we, on my farm, part of what our method of madness is, we don't try to plant zinnias 4 weeks before it's time to plant them, or plant cool season stuff and grow it into summer, or to keep them going into summer, way into summer. We try to grow what grows best in the season because, frankly, it's just easier. You don't have to give them a lot of CPR and nursing care. So just a little bit about soil blocking, because I got a lot of questions about that. As a general rule, and there's a whole chapter in Cool Flowers about seed starting, but the question that I've gotten a couple of times is that whether you put the seed on the surface of the block or if you push it down into the block, which gives it darkness, you need to read your seed packet. Or Cool Flowers, of course, tells you this bit of information on Cool Flowers, but as a general guideline, little seeds, snapdragons, summer annual coxcombs, celosias, they're all a little bit bigger than a speck of pepper. All of those get placed on the surface of the soil because they need light to germinate. Bigger seeds, for instance, again, tender annuals, marigolds and zinnias, which are a long, skinny seed, you don't just lay them on the top. You actually take them upright and put the pointy end first and push them down into the block, and the little tail is left sitting out, because bigger seeds, as a general rule, need darkness to sprout. That means the seed needs to be covered in soil so that they can sprout. So little seeds need light to germinate. They stay on the surface. Larger seeds need darkness to germinate. And again, your seed packet should tell you this information, and if it doesn't, just put your seed name into a search engine with sowing instructions, and that bit of information should come up. When to plant cool flowers. Here you go. No matter where you live, everybody can take advantage of cool flowers, hardy annuals. We all just plant at different times. Those of us in the lower half of the country are now, following these rules, able to grow flowers that we never dreamed we would grow. Because we always tried to plant them in spring, and of course our heat and humidity of summer took them out. We typically plant in in fall. Those people that are in the lower half of the country can even plant during winter, and I can too, sometimes depending on our winter. But the people in the north, I've gotten emails from people in Zone 2, Zone 3, and Zone 4 saying, well, is cool flowers really for me? Those people really can take advantage, because cool flowers is the group of flowers that you're going to plant long before your last frost date has passed. So you're not necessarily going to plant in the fall, which would be dreamy if you can figure out how to do that. However, you're going to be able to plant cool flowers 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. If your last frost date is June 1st, which I know that's true for many of you, that means during the month of April, you're going to be planting cool flowers. So it doesn't matter where you live. Everybody plants cool flowers. You just have to figure out when the time is for you. And particularly for those people up north, and for people like me in Zone 7 and 6, we plant again in very early spring to extend our bloom season, but you have to prepare the planting area in the fall. It's way too wet, typically, in very early spring to prepare soil, to prepare for a planting. So you prepare your spot now, mulch it, cover it in film, whatever you do in your garden, in your home garden or on your farm, to get that area ready and have it ready and waiting to plant in very early spring, which is 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. And I will say, for me, I plant those crops that I plant again in very early spring are Sweet William and Snapdragons. They just really do really well, and they start to bloom later than the fall planted stuff. And those hardy annuals, which are not winter hardy for me typically, that I plant in very early spring, are stock, which is not in cool flowers, that's a new one to add, and straw flowers. And another one that I have found does better planted in early spring than it does to winter over, even though it is typically winter hardy enough for me in Zone 7, is the pot marigold, calendula. We get a prettier stand of plants planted in very early spring. So there is that. And I did get specific questions about self-appointed, how to maintain self-appointed garden areas. And that means, self-appointed means planting those hardy annuals that typically are strong reseeders, meaning they flower and drop seed. And then you're going to walk out to your garden in the fall, and guess what? You're going to find little seedlings all over the ground where they've naturally sprouted themselves, which is like a gift, right? And there is a section in Cool Flowers that gives you a little bit of information on how I like to manage those. I tend to plant those seeds in an area that's not going to be cultivated, meaning it's not going to be tilled and torn down. Plant all of those in one area. I mean, we're talking about larkspur and bupleurum and bells of Ireland and rudbeckias, and some of the amies. This is a great, just a general garden for you to use area. So you plant all those in one area, knowing that you're not going to mulch really deep. You can mulch, but lightly, because ultimately, after these flowers bloom, they are going to drop their seed, and they need to be able to make contact. So let's just say I have an area in my garden, 10 by 20, that I've planted these seeds or in my landscape, I am going to know that that's a bed, that's an area that I'm going to enjoy their flowers next spring. And then as summer moves along, you know, I'm going to let them go to flower. I'm going to let them develop into seed, let them drop to the ground. It's going to look a little rough, not as tended as some of your other gardens or your landscape may be. But then come next fall, I am going to be out there crawling around with my hand hoe, the Japanese grass weeder, kind of hoeing and weeding around seedlings, that the seedlings are in cool flowers for you to identify if you forget what they look like, and thinning and kind of applying a little bit more mulch around those babies. And it's a different kind of garden chore, particularly for commercial growers. This may or may not work for you, but it's a great way to get some free plants, and they tend to grow really strong because they're taproot. I mean, they plant themselves where they're the happiest. So that's a great group. So somebody also asked about using hoops and row covers. We do use a lot of hoops and row covers here over the winter for cool flowers, not for cold protection, which the row cover that we use is Ag 19. It's a real lightweight fabric. 85% of air, water, and light go through it. We use row cover for wind and deer protection. We live in a really windy site. I mean gusty, windy site. And we have strong deer pressure in the wintertime because they're hungry, they're grazing. They walk on our beds. They don't necessarily eat our plants to the ground because they're so small they barely want to give them the time of day. But they walk around our garden if it's not covered, and their hoof marks leave holes all over our film. So we have found that hooping and covering just kind of spooks them and keeps them away. So the row cover is really helpful for people that have those conditions. And if you're trying to grow a hardy annual that is not cold hardy to your zone, and on page 138 in Cool Flowers is a cheat list. It tells you the names of flowers, what zone they're hardy to, and then the preferred method of seed starting. You can look down that list, and I'm in zone 7. So if I wanted to try to grow something that was only winter hardy to grow to zone 8, and I wanted to try to fall plant it to reap those benefits of a stronger root system, which means more stems, taller stems, I would double cover. I'd put 2 layers of row cover on those hoops just to create a nice little safe place under there, and oftentimes keeping the wind and concentrating the daytime heat on our beds will get those flowers through. Excuse me. So it's really easy to do that. And another thing is, someone asked about hardening off seedlings. Cool season seedlings need less hardening off than warm season. It's much easier for a plant to take cold, cool conditions than hot conditions. So you can plant out cool flowers directly in the garden, but covering them with the row cover really provides all of the necessary protection they need to harden them off. So I hope you've enjoyed this book study. We have really, really enjoyed it. And so the wrap-up for me, my request for you for the wrap-up is, please come back next spring and post your experiences with planting all these flowers. You can do it all winter too if you want to. Please just come back, because that really helps other people that are just being introduced to the book to see what's going on. And particularly, I want to hear from you people that are growing flowers one zone north of you, north of what that plant is hardy to. For instance, I'm in zone 7. If I grow some plants in zone that are only hardy, so we know, in zone 8 and do a great job with it, we want to hear about that. There was little documentation available to me in researching cool flowers for almost all the flowers that are listed in there, unless I found somebody that had grown them successfully for many years in a cold zone to winter them over. So if you grow something in a zone that I have listed south of you, let us know so we can include that information. And the other thing I really hope that you might help me out with, if you go to our website under workshops, there's going to be a program review comment page. And I mean, this book study is nothing but one big program for me. And if you want to just share your information, your experience, that'll help people looking to invite me to do programs for them, as well as for people to get a feel of how we go. And don't forget, please, to post your reviews of cool flowers on my website under the book in the store, as well as on Amazon, because that is a huge bonus to me. While Suzanne and I love doing these for you all, that is the return for us, is nothing but reviews and the satisfaction that you're having success with cool flowers. So I hope that you've enjoyed our study with cool flowers, and hope to see you back here in the future for other series. Have a good one.